Welcome to Open Source News. I am your brother and your host, BCP. Happy Monday. Hope you had a great weekend and I hope you had a great Father's Day. Those of you who are fathers, grandfathers, fathers figures, or those that celebrated with your beloved fathers and or grandfathers. And for those of you who have lost a father, whether recently or in the past, I hope you realize what an impact they had in your lives. And even though it may have been a bitter, sweet day, I do hope there was some sweet in that for you. By the way, if you like this episode, or if you think you're going to, just go ahead right now and hit the like button. And feel free to give us your comments down below. Your engagement helps us with the YouTube algorithm. Speaking of Father's Day, let's start off with a little bit of levity. We're going to get into some new revelations about backstabbing allegations of Mike Pence. We're also going to see how the government is going after Christians and not giving them the same respect or the same privileges and rights, if you will. Our rights come from God, not the government, but you know what I mean, as they are given secular parts of our government. We're also going to look at some great work being done by some real GOP leaders and how McCarthy is just another freaking joke. We're also going to look at that there may be actual credence to this idea of President Trump being Speaker of the House. But let's start off with this. Let's start off with President Trump and his tweet. Now, we know that President Trump has been banned from Twitter and Facebook and all social media. But what he does is he sends out these statements from his Save America PAC, and they get picked up by his supporters and others, and it gets tweeted out. So we can refer to these little blurbs by President Trump as tweets. We'll just call this a tweet. President Donald Trump on Sunday sent out a Father's Day message to his political adversaries. And this is what the statement reads. I'm looking at here as it was sent out by Right Side Broadcasting News. Statement by Donald J. Trump, 45th President of the United States, Save America, June 20th, 2021. Happy Father's Day to all, including the radical left, rhinos, and other losers of the world. Hopefully, eventually, everyone will come together. I'm not going to break this down. It's just a little fun that he would say a happy Father's Day to all, but single out his opponents, the radical left, which are also our opponents, rhinos, who are also our opponents, and losers of the world. And then with a message of unity, hopefully, eventually, everyone will come together. Now, folks, I'm going to do something that I don't think I've ever done. I don't think I've ever done this. I'm going to play you a little soundbite here from Al Sharpton, also known as Reverend Al Sharpton, also known as busted for drugs or whatever, whatever that case may be. Al Sharpton I consider to be a charlatan or race baiter, just a man who makes money off of pain and grief or what have you, an opportunist and a joke, quite honestly. He is not a leader in the community, in the black community. He is a leader and a spokesperson for a very small segment of people. But my goodness gracious, I was floored when I heard what I'm about to play for you right now. What's happening right now, folks, is that under the regime of the former Vice President Joe Biden, there's a lot of infighting and there's a lot of a little civil conflict going on in the left and the Democrats, and they're eating each other. And this is fun to watch, and it's also very advantageous to conservatives because things have gone so far left, so far progressive, and then you have all these competing things. You have the people who have this, let's say, the environment as their pet project or as their focus, and then you have the people with the different LG communities and what have you, and then you have the Bravo leave a mic types, and so you have all these things, and you have Biden trying to appease to all and none of them, and it's an absolute mess. So I'm starting to see a lot of backtalk, a lot of disagreements, vocal disagreements, and pushing back on the Biden regime agenda. If you caught my weekend roundup yesterday, I even show you how Obama's former ethics chief totally unloaded on the Biden regime for hiring, for nepotism and hiring all the top people, or many of the top people in the Biden administration have their kids working in the administration as well. The same things that people were saying against Trump, they're doing as well. It's always hypocrisy when it comes to the left. They have no principles. So this one I thought was very interesting. I want you to listen to this, because even a broken record is twice a day. Even a broken record it must be Monday morning. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. And the reason why I play this is because a conservative can say this, but hearing it come from a person who is very often put on television, this is from MSNBC, often put on television to poo-poo and to defecate on our Constitution and our rights and spin the narrative for the Marxists. I think this is a stronger voice. I think it's a stronger voice for the leftists because it's coming from one of their own, if you will.
Certainly we should sit back and congratulate ourselves, but we should not condemn ourselves for the steps and the progress that has been made. And I think that one of the problems that we have, which is why I call them latte liberals, is we're having people assess what has happened, that they were not the ones that it was happening to. So if you're sitting around sipping lattes in the Hamptons, talking about what's going on in Harlem, you may not know the progress that we have made in terms of going from not being able to vote in my mother and father's generation to electing a black president in my generation.
Al Sharpton calling out the Hamptons. Who hangs out the Hamptons? I don't know, the Clintons and people of that ilk. Hanging out in the Hamptons, latte progressives that are not recognizing the progress that has been made in America for black Americans and celebrating the pain. But that would be a great soundbite, but he actually goes on to talk about that there has been progress.
Because you were never discriminated against. And I think that a lot of people have taken advantage of our pain rather than trying to ease our pain.
Democrats, Marxists taking advantage of the pain of a minority group or a group that perceives themselves to be victims of injustice. As a black American, I know this is a controversial statement and I don't understand why. Even Al Sharpton just said we had a black president. We had a biracial president. America is not racist. I don't know why that is so controversial. And I'll make an even more controversial statement. The white Americans are so like, and I'm not saying this is, I'm just calling it as it is, folks, are so much on eggshells because if they're friendly to black people, some black people go like, oh, he's being overly friendly because he's really a racist. And then if he's not, he ignored me because he's racist. Because guess what? There's racism. Racism is racism. A lot of racism is coming from people of color. And they've got my white brothers and sisters so on eggshells about like, if I treat them normally, then I'm racist because I don't give them preferential treatment. If I give them preferential treatment, then I'm racist because I'm compensating for the past sins of my ancestors who probably weren't even slave owners anyway, and you shouldn't be held responsible for the sins of your parents anyway. It doesn't work that way. I would say I digress, but let me just finish this up so we can go on to the other news. But I feel really strongly about this. I've commented on it over the last few days, maybe because it's Juneteenth and what have you. Folks, but we have made progress. Even Al Sharpton, the man who makes millions of dollars off of pain and suffering and racial division, recognizes this.
Whether it comes to race, whether it comes to gender, whether it comes to those in the LGBTQ community. And really, I think it is also antithetical to keeping movements going to act like we're not making progress. People need victories to keep fighting.
It doesn't behoove the progressives to act like there has been no progress. Wow. Yeah, this is probably a very rare moment, me playing you a sound clip from Al Sharpton and saying that he is right. Once again, we've been saying this, But I think it's very powerful when you have someone like that saying it on MSNBC. All right, folks, I saw this headline on Fox Business, and this is just an example of the same thing we saw under the Obama regime. IRS rejects tax-exempt status for Christian group over ties to Republican Party. Now you may say, wow, let's dig into this. Let's dig into this. The IRS rejected a Texas-based Christian group's tax-exempt status because the Bible's teachings are affiliated with the Republican Party. Oh, wow. Tell me, does it sound absolutely anti-Christian on part of the IRS? Stephen Martin, the IRS Director of Exemption, sent a letter to Christians Engaged. That's the nonprofit organization, or that were filing for nonprofit status. Said the organization used Bible teachings typically affiliated with the Republican Party and candidates to educate people how to vote. And this is from the Fox Business article. In a May letter addressed to Christian Engaged, Stephen Martin said that the group used Bible teachings typically affiliated with the Republican Party and candidates to educate individuals on how to vote. By teaching members about issues such as the sanctity of life, the definition of marriage, biblical justices, law versus lawlessness, freedom of speech, religious liberty, government and business ethics, human trafficking, fiscal responsibility in government budgeting, defense, borders, immigration, U.S. and Israel relations, the group had engaged in prohibited campaign intervention. Quote, while you educate voters on what the Bible says about issues, your educational activities are not neutral. The topics typically are affiliated with distinct candidates and specific political platforms. Now, this group formed last year, and they educate individuals on how to choose between imperfect candidates, urging members to look at what the candidate says about issues and see if their beliefs align with the Bible. Now, the Christian Engaged says they do not print or they do not have any voter guides. They don't back or support any particular candidates. They educate their fellow Christians on how to pick the better candidates based on their principles. And they encourage people to participate in the political process and to vote. And the founder, Bunny Pound, said, how can anyone be against that? The article goes on to say, still, the IRS also noted that the group does not qualify for tax-exempt status because it is not operated exclusively for religious and educational purposes. Specifically, you're engaged in prohibited political campaign intervention. It says invention here, but I think that's a typo. That's interesting, because there's an organization that you may have heard of. Their name is, their initials are PP, and they talk about planning your parenthood. And they're tax exempt. They get money from the government and in turn donate that money to Democrat political candidates and causes. It's a loophole, I'm sure, that organization still has their tax exempt status. What about labor unions that back specific candidates, do all kinds of political activity, voter drives? They actually do say who to vote for, and they also have their tax exempt status. What the IRS is saying here is that their main business, if you will, is to educate people on political things, and therefore they don't have tax exempt status, even though I've clearly demonstrated two organizations that have tax exempt status that are very active in political activism. What are your thoughts? Put it down below. By the way, folks, if you're not aware, we do have a second channel, the BCP Report. Make sure you hit the link down below so you can subscribe to that channel as well and check out our content. Or you can just go to bcpreport.com. It'll take you to our videos. Also, we have an off-platform show that's not here on YouTube at bcpextras.com, where we can cover issues that are not really allowed to be discussed at length here on this platform, but we break it down for you there. People are been very responsive and liking our show over there. We started just a few months ago, and we have episode 71 coming up later today. All right, so here we go. We have a new book by a Wall Street Journal reporter, Michael Bender. And he alleges that Mike Pence praised former Trump advisor Gary Cohn over President Trump's response to Charlottesville. All right, so this is the second day in a row that we've got a Mike Pence story. Now I'm gonna share this information with you, and you can do with it as you please, and you can come to conclusions if this is further evidence of Mike Pence being a backstabber, if this story is even to be believed, and or if this is just a non-story. All right, so President Trump had gained the ire of Cohn. By the way, Gary Cohn, who was one of the president's top economic advisors, is a registered Democrat, and he was a long-time New York resident. So originally from, I guess, Cleveland, but a New Yorker in his later life, and a Democrat, a Democrat. It seems of the moderate to liberal variety. So in an excerpt of Bender's book, it says that President Trump had gained the ire of Cohn for saying that there were very fine people on both sides of the debate who wanted to remove the Robert Lee statue and the people who wanted to keep it. This is what was published in Politico a few days ago. It describes a confrontation between Cohn and the president. Gary Cohn, once again, one of his top economic advisors and a registered Democrat, had stood next to Trump for the infrastructure news conference and grew increasingly alarmed and uncomfortable. Later, in a private meeting inside the Oval Office, Cohn unloaded on the president. Cohn told Trump that his lack of clarity had been harmful to the country and that he put an incredible amount of pressure on people working in the White House. He told Trump that he might have to quit. No one backed Cohn up. Others in the room, including Pence, remained quiet. But after the incident, Cohn returned to his office after the meeting broke up. Following a few minutes behind, Pence climbed this flight of stairs and appeared at the threshold of Cohn's door and said, "I'm proud of you." But he said it safely out of earshot of the president. That is how the story is described in the book by Michael Bender. Is this a non-story? You are allowed to disagree with the president. I know some folks, anytime I make a video, like one thing that's incredible on this channel, folks, and maybe I'm not going to shoot myself in the foot for mentioning it, is that the average like to dislike ratio on these videos, and the reason why you pressing that like button is really, really helpful, is 99.7. That means out of 1,000 people that come on any one of our videos, 997 people give it a thumbs up, 3 give it a thumbs down. If this were a very fair platform for conservative content, we would be getting a lot more views because we have, once you come on this channel and once you land on this channel, you stay on and watch a good portion of the video. The average YouTube thing, if you're holding people's attention for more than 5 minutes, you're killing it on YouTube, and we do way over that. And we have statistically, you really can't get better than 997 when 1,000 people come on this channel, 997 liking it. But invariably, if there's a video where I say that I disagree with President Trump on something, or I do any kind of critique or criticism, and it's not about the man, it's usually about policy. Like, for instance, my wife and I were talking yesterday, and we love President Trump. We support President Trump. We just wish President Trump had done more in dismantling the deep state. We wish that there was more action and more arrests for these treasonous traitors, rat bastards that caused so much pain and division in this country over the last 5 years and continue to do so. I'll say something like that, and people are like, unsubbing, you're a traitor, or whatever. Just because I disagree with President Trump, you're allowed to disagree with President Trump. So I want your opinion down below. Is this a sign of, is this particular instance, not talking about what happened in November or yesterday's episode, is this a sign that he was being, that Pence was being a traitor because he agreed with Cohn that President Trump wasn't clear in his communication over at Charlottesville? I don't know if this is a story or a non-story, but what I'm reporting on here is I think we're going to have a trend of more exposure of Mike Pence coming from, I think, both sides. I think the left think that Mike Pence might be a threat to their forthcoming political plans in the next couple years and want to take him out. And I think that Republicans and conservatives want to take him off the chessboard, not consider him seriously, while the establishment types want to promote him. So, folks, I think over the next year or so, we're going to see a lot more and hear a lot more from Pence about Pence, what he did, what he didn't do, and other news as he continues to try to become a prominent voice in the Republican Party and perhaps run for the highest office in 2024 or after that. Now, I've said on January 20th in a live stream after the installation of the former Vice President Joe Biden that perhaps President Trump should run for a legislative office. I said perhaps he should run for Congress so he could be Speaker of the House. I said that. And that was a video, like I said, that people were like, how are you a traitor? You've given up the fight already. I mean, this is on January 20th. It might have been January 21st. But I mean, it was like that day after the installation and that whole joke of a process that we saw in D.C. that no one showed up to for the 81 million getting former vice president, supposedly. And now it's so funny how I'm seeing this being reported and this is coming up. This came up with McCarthy. And as Jessie Jane Duff tweeted out, the jealousy is getting intense. And it was in response to an article from the Conservative Brief that says, McCarthy comes out against Trump for Speaker. So let's get into this. Kilmeade on Fox asked McCarthy about the prospects of Trump leading as Speaker of the House, highlighting talk that has been going around Mar-a-Lago. So apparently this is something that's been going around. I've reported on this. President Trump was asked about this on a podcast and about this idea. And President Trump, when I played you the audio, President Trump said, yeah, people have been talking about this as an interesting idea. I'm listening to it. He didn't commit. He didn't say that he was going to do it. He didn't say he was going to do it. He said, yeah, this is something that advisors and people around me have bringing up. And it's an interesting idea. It's an interesting thing to consider. And this is a question that happened. If you guys do take the House and finish the job that you almost shocked the world by doing a few months ago and take the House, you're only five seats down that maybe he runs for a seat or just appointed as Speaker. Would you be for President Trump becoming Speaker? Now, let me remind you, folks, as I covered here in a previous episode, showing you, we actually went to documentation per the Constitution and the House rules and what have you. The House appoints their Speaker and other officers. They don't have to be actual elected officials that are in the House of Representatives. It's traditionally been that way, but the rules do not specifically state that a Speaker of the House has to be a fellow congressman or woman. McCarthy replied, laughing somewhat nervously about the question, that he had spoken to Trump, who had voiced his desire to become Speaker. So McCarthy is saying that he has talked to President Trump, and President Trump has said that he wants to be Speaker. Very, very interesting. You know, I've talked to President Trump many times. He tells me he wants to be Speaker, and I think he should be President. So, a couple things here. We're now getting from McCarthy, if he's to be believed, that President Trump has talked about being Speaker of the House. So these ideas that we threw out in January, or I should say I threw out in January, aren't so far-fetched. According to McCarthy, President Trump does want to be Speaker of the House. But what's important here is McCarthy thinks he should be president. And that's why at the end of this interview, Kilmeade said, all right, Leader McCarthy, could be Speaker McCarthy. It might be Speaker Trump. We'll have to find out. Nice to see you, Kevin. Have a great weekend. And he got more nervous laughter from McCarthy over this. Very, very interesting, folks. Now this idea, according to McCarthy, seems to have more weight about President Trump being Speaker of the House. Once again, he does not have to run as a for Congress in Florida. He can be appointed if the Republicans get the majority. So it seems to me that it would, if this were to happen, probably be best for President Trump to campaign with the Save America PAC for Republicans for them to take back the House. Of course, we're assuming that many things are fixed between now and then so that we can actually trust the results. and actually have a fair shake. You know what I'm talking about. And then get the Republicans to have the House back. And then because he's actually the leader of the Republican Party, even though the establishment would have people think otherwise, he can get them to appoint him as Speaker of the House. They can go after Biden, perhaps start impeachment process, do other things, and then if he wants to, and he plans to, it sounds like, run in 2024. Very interesting, folks. What do you think about the prospect of a Speaker of the House, Donald Trump? Please put it down below. We appreciate you being here. We'll have another news segment for you this evening. And please do not forget to check out our second channel, the BCP Report, and our off-platform show at bcpextras.com. So the next one, ciao, goodbye, and God bless.